What do a speaking coach, a strategy consultant, and a creative director have in common? Sounds like the start of a bad joke, right? But honestly, it's all about finding out what people really do in their jobs. The stories, the struggles, the coffee breaks. The real stuff you won't get in a job title.
Welcome to a space where we sit down with people from all kinds of careers, have a laugh, and dive into what makes their work meaningful. Whether you're looking to learn something new or just here for a good story, let us be your guide. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Charlie.
And let's get
Casually
Bro!
Awesome. So today we have a wonderful guest. Lindsey Lerner has been everything from a narrative strategist to a tour manager, and now is pursuing creative art direction, bringing stories to life. Lindsey, thank you so much for joining us.
Heck yeah, I'm stoked to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, to get started, can you tell us about what you're doing and why is it so cool?
Totally. Yeah, most recently I launched a project which you graciously were a part of from the early days, which I appreciate, called Field Notes from the Work and the Wild. And the idea came because to Charlie's point, have been a photographer and a tour manager and an anthropologist and you name it. And at this point, I feel like I've done it and done it well in most cases. And for me, I didn't necessarily want to pick a lane, but rather I wanted to braid together a lot of the different skills that I have. So for me, this project is braiding together a bit of my anthropology background, my photography skills, as well as interviewing people. And so I go and meet people where they're at. I ask where their happy place is. And that could be sometimes for people, it is their actual job, their career, their work. And for others, it is definitely not. For others, sometimes it's a music studio or a yoga studio or an art studio or somewhere more creative. And I sit down and interview them for an hour or two. And we take some environmental portraits, which is one of my favorite things to do. And then at the end of it, I come back home and do my homework and end up compiling that into about a 5 to 10 minute audio story that gets published on Substack along with the photos.
Ooh. So we are in good company here. I think we are all of the three of us like to have explore many different paths.
Yeah.
Lindsey, you are completely outspoken about it and you talk about it in with a lot of enthusiasm.
For sure.
There are many people out there who are multi-talented, who have many passions, who try many things, but they're a bit scared to tell it out loud because we live in a world where it seems like there is a pressure to be specialized, hyper specialized in one thing. Can you tell us how you view it yourself? How can you be so enthusiastic when some people are hiding it?
Yeah, I mean, that's why. Like we're humans and we are not just one thing. And I would like very bluntly just call bullshit on anyone who thinks otherwise. And my career, I spent 10 years plus in the music industry. And a lot of folks, a perfect example of this is my favorite event that we used to host at the production space that I ran for a long time was called No Mic Nights. And the intention there was to bring together anybody who was interested in music, arts, production, creativity, whatever it was, like come and hang out with us. This is what the community is for. And on those nights, you had all the musicians, all the bands that we were working with, but we also invited people from the community. They could be accountants, veterinarians, doctors, whoever, lawyers, I didn't care. It was like, if you're interested and you're open-minded, come and hang and learn about what we're doing here. And by the end of the night, you would find out, that Paul, the seemingly stuffy accountant who came in with his suit and tie, super, super tight and all buttoned up. By the end of the night, you find out that he's in some old 70s rock cover band and he's bullshitting with the guys that are all in these bands. And he's helping them get their act together so that they can be an official business registered with the state. Like that is the whole point. People have so many different levels and depths to them that we, in my opinion, need to give each other more permission and continue to give ourselves permission to be able to show that. I think that's what my pet peeve at the moment is.
And you know what like a rightfully earned pet peeve? I think we live in like a professional bubble of like
Totally.
hyper loving the specialist, right?
Mm,
That
totally.
and you know what? Speaking as someone who is in some regards a specialist in some areas,
Mm,
it's kind of cool because you focus on one thing and then you get really
sure.
good at it and then it opens doors. But I think the
Totally.
reality is it's only good until it becomes antiquated, right? And we're seeing that
Sure.
right now,
Oh,
because like
definitely.
a world that is being kind of turned upside down, shaken, and
For sure.
asked for its lunch money by AI,
Yeah,
is now like taking the technical part, making
sure.
it easier, and then now
Definitely.
everyone has to study the non-technical part, right? The things that are more
Sure.
important now are soft skills.
Yeah, it's
Um,
about time.
yeah. Well, while I agree with you, I think it's interesting to kind of get a a bead on people who have been doing this for longer than maybe the norm, right? I
Mm,
mean, I'm sure you've kind of felt some kind of resistance, people saying like, no, you just got to pick a path and go, right? And
sure.
just like just go all the way through. Maybe, you know, I'm like hesitant to say it, but it's really like the just get a job and
Sure.
stick with it kind of a deal.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and I mean, I'm sure that while the passion for a lot of different things was always there for you, maybe
Mm,
the drive to openly explore and be cool with being you know, a person with multi talents
sure.
was maybe not always there. So can you tell us about kind of
Mm.
how you went from, oh man, I just have to pick a career to no, I pick all the careers I want and figure out the rest as I go.
Yeah, I mean, I've never thought about a career really. When I was 6, I got handed a camera. And from the time I was 6 until 19, like that really was the only career, if you will, of being a photographer that was ever implanted in my brain. That was the thought. It was like, okay, so in high school I was shooting weddings. Why people were letting me do that, I don't know, but I was. That was paying the bills, and then I worked at everything. Target Portrait Studio, Life Touch Portrait Studio, JC Penney, all of these like terrible portrait studios, that you go to the mall and get your portraits done, like horrendous. But I did all of that and then I worked at the local newspapers. And when I graduated from high school, to go all the way back, when I graduated from high school, to your point, everyone was very much like, well, what are you going to do with your life? And when I ever said that I was going to art school, balancing that with being top of the graduating class, president of National Honor Society, like the utmost nerd, the math didn't math for people. And so from that point, when I went to art school and everyone else was they were going to, I grew up in Rhode Island. So folks were going to Brown and they were going to Harvard, these Ivy League, prestigious institutions. And when I went to art school, people were like, why are you throwing your life away? I don't understand. And then when I got there, I I was so much of a square, to be honest with you, that like I was the problem and I couldn't compute like, wait, I can just make things all day. I don't have to be stressed out in some, algebra course or something like that. And so I psyched myself out, to be honest with you, and was like, oh my gosh, no, like I have to leave. And there was some other family stuff going on. So I ended up transferring to a primarily business school. And I studied anthropology there, which further just confused everyone. But what they didn't know was that the head of the anthropology department was also a photographer. And so that was my loophole, was like, I gotta come back to Rhode Island, but I still want to do photography, but I can't. Like, there was just too many things up in the air. And so for me, I think it was interesting in terms of being able to never check boxes. Like I didn't care. It was more so, what am I curious about? What am I motivated by? And so going from being a weird nerdy kid at art school to then all of a sudden I was the weird nerdy kid at business school, like that didn't make any sense, Like it never fit. And so all of that to say, I have never been one to be a fan of picking a path, and have always realistically more or less worked for myself in some way, shape, or form.
Wow. It's funny because you mentioned twice during this story, two times, that at some point people were telling you, is she crazy or what? Is she throwing her life by the window? Is she kind of sacrificing her career, her future?
Sure.
It's crazy how much pressure we can feel just because we want to do what we
Yeah,
want, just because we want to explore our own path or
totally.
interests. I wonder, Lindsay, what's your compass? Is it curiosity? Is it
Mm,
did you name it, or did you try to have this um, analysis of what you were doing?
mm.
Or do you follow your interests?
Yeah, I think it was more curiosity was definitely, I think, the main calling and like the main barometer at that point. I think, connecting the dots backwards throughout every single thing that I've done, whether it has been a W-2 paying job or my own business or freelance gigs, whatever, connecting the dots backwards, it all comes down to connecting with people and connecting other people. Like that's really all I care about. So photography, most people think of as just you go out, you take photos, you edit them, you call it a day. Like it was always about, and still is about, the people. As much as I love the art of it and I like messing around, whether it was in the dark room or, learning new softwares and whatnot to tweak photos, that's one part of it, but it's always, always, always been about the people and their stories. And historically, believe it or not, I was very shy. And so photography was that way and was a great excuse to talk to anyone and everyone. And so at a very young age, like baby Lindsey was just like, hey, would you mind if I take your photo? That was one way to start to connect to people. And the other thing, again, with that shyness in mind, the other part of it was I never historically, really, until very recently, had much of a concrete voice and an ability to advocate for myself. And photography was that thing. Rather than, I say this is something I say a lot now, is show, don't tell. And in hindsight, everything was show, don't tell. It was like, okay, I can't necessarily communicate, or I'm too shy, or maybe I'm a little nervous and I don't want to tell you this thing, but here's how I see it. Very literally, this is a photo, this is how I see this event that took place, this person, this place, this thing, and here's how that stands.
You bring up a really interesting word that I don't think we talk a lot about when it comes to kind of like building careers, building life
Mm,
in general, is advocacy,
mm,
right? I think there's such a kind of like a tone of necessity when it comes
sure.
to doing things.
Mm,
Um, you know, you get a job because it pays you money because you need to pay for rent.
right.
But there are other things in your life that are important,
Sure.
that generally I mean, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, we let
Mm,
go to the wayside.
sure.
I think about my time in, for example, public accounting, and
Mm-hmm.
I was working at my worst, it was like 120 hours a week. And I distinctly remember thinking to myself, like, I haven't seen the sun in
Wow.
3 months.
Yeah.
And it's because I would
Oof.
go to work and it was dark out. I leave work and it's dark out.
Totally.
And I kept thinking to myself, like, I mean, this can't be healthy. This can't be normal. This can't be like something
Yeah,
that normal human beings should go for. But I was always
for sure.
afraid to say something to my boss because it's like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you define such like a well-established norm, especially
Totally.
in an industry? But the reality is, at some point, whether it's you leave the job or
Sure.
finally say to your boss, like, hey, I prefer seeing the sun,
Right.
um you advocate for yourself. I mean,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I guess in your case, it must have happened a lot sooner than you expected,
Mm,
right? I'm sure being a kid in high school, someone goes up to you and says like, yeah, I mean, your photography is great and I'm sure you want to do this for the
Sure.
rest of your life, but like you still have to pass this math test.
Hmm.
Right? Like you still have
Totally.
to get through all of these weird hurdles that we assign for people.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
definitely.
how, I mean, I guess, how do you advocate for yourself? Maybe
Mm,
not just as someone who is like forging a path in multiple directions, but
sure.
also as someone who's like now discovering that saying no, I won't do this, or saying yes, I will do this, but under these
Totally.
conditions,
Mm,
working for yourself, I feel like no one talks about that part of advocacy in business. How do you go about that?
mm. Yeah, I think in terms of advocacy, I mean, are you specific to working for yourself or advocating for yourself in general? Which,
Uh, I mean both, but like let's start with working for yourself. How about?
mm, that. So, in terms of advocacy, I think that that's as whether you're your own business owner, a freelancer, it is for me has been one of the hardest skills to learn because, like you said, when you have a job, there's certain rules, regulations. You're supposed to be here from this time to this time. You need to do XYZ. Someone's watching you. When you are on your own, you're only accountable to yourself. So if you wanted to not do anything, you could just go and not do anything. You also have to deal with the repercussions of your actions. And so I think that's the nuance is in a lot of ways I have to advocate for myself against myself because if left to my own devices, I will, to your point, just go and work 70, 80, 100 hours a week because I'm excited about it, because I'm enthusiastic about it, or as like a coping mechanism for being stressed. And so I have to find the balance and really get super strict. There's a woman, incredible woman, Christina Wallace, who wrote the book called Portfolio Life. And she's just an amazing friend and human. She teaches at Harvard. And I had interviewed her on a podcast that I hosted. And something that she stuck out that I thought admittedly was ridiculous at the time. She said that she puts everything in her calendar, like eating, showering, like even teeny tiny
Wow.
things into her calendar so she can see where all of her time goes. And I was like, that's a little neurotic. And that's me saying that. And like, I get it. And then I started like I've experimented. I've gone like putting like bathroom breaks into my calendar all the way through like not using a calendar. And now I finally found this balance where it's like, oh, like rest is super, super important. We do need to take breaks throughout the day. There is time to go and take a walk, take a lap, walk the dog, whatever. And so I think that's where advocacy has shown up for me. And then when it comes to more of the external facing side of things, being able to your point, actually say no and turn down work is something that I have started to do more recently because there is an initial reaction when offered a project or a collaboration with someone. If my gut is screaming and being like, no, 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 and I don't listen, those projects always go sideways. And so, more often than not, over the last couple of years, I've been listening to that initial gut reaction, and that has made all the difference. And it's much more about following the energy rather than just looking at the stats on paper. Because I've had plenty of projects where on paper it's like, oh wow, this could be really great, but that initial gut reaction is off. And so, analyzing that chasm that exists between the two has made a big difference.
And you know what? I kind of want to like dig deeper into one part that you mentioned here because I think there's such a huge misconception of people who work
Mm,
in creative industries
sure.
that they're not organized, right?
Mm,
Like I I I understand that there are some people who live and die by their calendar. In fact, I'm one of
sure.
those people.
Yeah.
Um, Granted, I don't put bathroom breaks in there, but everything that is of relevancy, I
Sure.
try to schedule on my calendar so that like I have one central point of location. But
Yeah.
I think it's really important to talk about the technical process of how do you manage time in creative field because uh,
Sure.
my guess is that it's not you can't just be creative from 9 to 5, but you also
Correct.
can't like limit yourself to having that full 24-hour span. Otherwise, you'd probably just curl up and die at the end of the week.
Totally.
Um,
Totally.
how do you manage a creative lifestyle, a creative career, but
Sure.
like inject that piece of I guess maybe not just strictness, but at least organization?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is, and you're catching me, the two of you are catching me in a bit of the messy middle of this process, which I hope is helpful to other people. So I will do my best to share it coherently. What I've realized is that from a very, very young age, I was always type A, neurotic, whatever nice way you want to spin it. Very organized, very regimented, like everything. And when I got involved in the music industry, I got connected to musicians because I play guitar and I play drums, and we were all hanging out and we were jamming, we were doing our thing. And as things started to get more and more serious with the bands that I was working with, admittedly, no hit to my ego, I'm not the best musician. I do it for fun because I love it. And the people that I was around were top tier, wildly talented musicians. But because of my personality, I was the most organized one. And so that's where the nuance is between like, what is your personality and what is skill sets that you want to execute on. And so I've spent now 12, 15 years of my career being the organized person, the go-to person, the get shit done person, which is why I've been in everything from operations to tour managing to logistics to whatever it is. And so now the last, let's call it year and a half of being the creator instead of managing the creators, that has been a really, really wild ride. And to your point about organizing my day with that, that has been so much internal work that I didn't really clock, that I've had to process, because so much of it is based on where the energy is on any given day. And that is the nuance that is more difficult than not to try to follow, especially as a woman with a period. My menstrual cycle takes a huge impact on however I'm feeling on any given day of any given day of the month. And so that is the other part of it too, that I've started tracking all of these different metrics, seeing where how am I feeling when. And there's certain weeks that are admittedly better for socializing, and there's other weeks where you definitely shouldn't talk to me, and there's other weeks where I can create most of the stuff for field notes. If I'm honest, like I will go through and create 6-8 of them at a time, because there's a surge of energy, and I also have ADHD. And so there's a lot of different pieces at play that I've been puzzle piecing together over the last, let's call it 18 months or so. And now I'm just starting to find a relatively sane balance that makes sense.
It looks so complex. To tell you, Lindsey, I started to work as an independent about 12 years ago, and it was so hard. I struggled for years. Probably struggled for around 6 to 7 years before I started to realize what really didn't work and what worked. But to be fair with you, it's really a process that it's fluid. Nowadays, I have something that works, but I perfectly know that in a few months I will do differently.
Exactly.
Sometimes I need to be very strict with my calendars. Sometimes I need to be very flexible. It's really dependent on the type of work I do, and just following the energy. I think that's what you say. The most important thing to manage is your energy. If you're in a mood where you feel controlled by your calendar, then maybe that's the time to just remove it and see how it goes, because you probably missed some alignment in the process. From here, when I hear you, Lindsey, it seems like chaos, to be honest. So It's really wonderful that it seems to be a chaos though that you somehow started to being able to listen to. So I know
Yeah,
that there are many
exactly.
I know there are many
Exactly.
people who might be listening to this episode right now
Mm.
and who didn't figure out the way
Sure.
out of their chaos. Uh,
Mm.
what would you tell them?
Yeah, I think for me, we spoke earlier about permission, and I think that is what it comes down to is I have now allowed myself to be consistent, or rather hold myself accountable to the truth of the moment and meeting myself where I'm at rather than consistency. Like I was a high school athlete, I was a college athlete, like I've run marathons, I've done all of these different races and all of these different things. Like I can do the consistency until I run myself into the ground. And when I look back at it, I'm like, we probably could have done that a little bit better rather than saying, every single day I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. and I'm going to jump in the cold plunge and do the sauna and do all of whatever tech bro morning routines are being, publicly advertised and shoved down your throat at the moment. Like I can do that. Or when I work in alignment, to your point, Jeff, with myself and with how I'm feeling and meeting myself where I'm at, that tends to work better and has, from a mental health standpoint and from a physical health standpoint, that has made a huge difference. And I'm not saying that I'm not using it as, I think sometimes people can use that in a very use that as an excuse, which
Yeah.
I am not a fan of. I'm very much like, I say what I mean what I say. And so if I tell you that I'm going to be there, I'm going to be there. And I expect that in return, unless there is some, dire circumstance, then there's some nuance there. But I do think that once you start to be more conscious of how you operate and how you move through the world, and you're actually taking stock of how you're feeling and who you're feeling that with, and really understanding the ways in which you're moving through the world and the ways in which you're showing up, that I think starts to really bring attention to what changes need to happen.
Kind of like going off the rails a little bit here. I wanted to know something very particular about you and your background and
Sure.
I guess your experience here is, when we first met, um, it was kind of astounding to me to hear your background and everything. And I distinctly remember you, I don't want to say like grilling because that has like a very negative connotation, but like you were absolutely digging into a person about like HR information systems or
Sure.
intake systems. And you were asking such poignant questions because you were like, yeah, but like how will AI like determine whether or not someone is good for a job? Uh
Sure.
and but you did it in such a way that I think if anyone else did it, they would be so unlikable. Um, and you just had this very matter of fact, like, no, these are just facts. This is just how this works. But I'm really genuinely interested in your work and what you do. And I
Sure.
was just like, oh my God, I can't do that. I can't. Um, but this is kind of the basis for your work, right? Because when you
Sure.
do your field from the notes,
Mm-hmm.
as much as you want to kind of like give a perfect picture of
Sure.
someone that
Mm-hmm.
makes them look, like the best thing since sliced bread, the reality is people are full of flaws.
Sure.
But you like to like acknowledge them,
Mm.
and I'd almost even say humanize those flaws in a
Sure.
way that doesn't make the person feel bad about them.
Mm.
Um,
Totally. Totally.
and like whether it's like in a verbal aspect or a written aspect, writing
Mm.
about them. Um, I can for my example, I have this one picture that you took of me where I
Sure.
have like a little piece of hair dangling. And I distinctly remember you saying afterwards, after you already took the picture, like, "Hey, do you want to fix your hair? Like, you're probably not gonna like that." And I'm
Right.
like, "Oh my God, you're so right. I'm not gonna like that." And then I realized you took the picture already. I'm like, "Damn it!"
Of course. Of
Um,
course.
but the more I look at it, the more I realize now it's like it made me seem normal, right?
Sure.
It's not overly produced. It's not
Right.
um in a way that makes me look, I guess, fake in a sense.
Totally.
But
Totally.
I, going back to my original point here, when you examine people and
Mm.
you talk about kind of the realities of who they are,
Hmm.
I'm sure you must get a lot of pushback on creative direction, right? Oh, I want to look like this. I really want
Mm.
to seem like this. And as an artist I mean, you could do that, but would that,
Sure.
impact your integrity? I almost argue it's
Totally.
not even about integrity for you. It's more just like, no, it makes you look better when you're just a normal person. Um,
Yeah.
Talk to
Yeah.
me about that.
Sure. I mean, what's interesting is that there's let's see. It has been interesting to say the least. When I started doing this project, my intention was art for the sake of art. I, as a creative person, wanted to get back into photography, but I didn't want to just go out and take photos like I had in the past. I wanted to use all of the other skills of interviewing, of connecting with people, and just feeling more embodied and more comfortable and confident in myself. And I wanted to push myself in a new way. And so I did, let's say, 10 or so field notes. No cost, was just doing it because I was curious and I was following that curiosity and wanted to go and connect with new people. And so I went and I did that, had a blast. All of the people who I delivered those field notes to sent me messages and or called me, usually crying, mostly tears of joy, about being seen and heard and understood. And that was a big part of it. That is, I have a creative mission statement, and that's a big part of it, is to help people feel seen, heard, and understood, and to take up space. And so that to me was like, oh, amazing. Like I set out to do a thing, I did it. This feels fantastic, and got really good portraiture out of it. And then along the way, a couple of months ago, some folks reached out and they said, "Oh, can we commission you to do some field notes? We have, we have a startup, we have a new product coming out. You can do stories of the founders, you could do stories of the CEOs, whatever it is." And I was like, "Wait, you want to pay me for that thing?" Like, yeah, hell yeah, that sounds great. Like, you saw again, I'm a very literal person. You saw the Substack. You want to pay me for that? Yes, yes. Okay. And then the reality, to your point, Charlie, is that then when money is exchanged, there's actual creative directing involved. And that turns out I hated, if we're honest, because it stripped away the narrative and the creativity from me and gave it back to them, because they were worried, what if my mom sees this, or my boss, or some advisor or supervisor, or whatever, an investor. And to your point, they didn't want the whole truth. They're like, let's edit that, let's tweak that, let's change this. And as somebody who cut their teeth and learned photography in a newsroom, like, I'm looking at this much more from a photojournalistic perspective. I'm not coming in, if I'm honest, I don't even know how to use all of the lights and how to set up a studio. I'm like, put me on the street, let me find the best light to work with, or throw me, in your apartment, in your house, in your garden, whatever, I'll figure it out. And so that's a long-winded way of saying that I don't enjoy it when it turns into a more commercialized product.
It's a beautiful example of someone who reached a point in their life where they explored many directions and
Mm.
got many different skills and starts to combine them
Mm.
into something new.
Sure.
I I'm doing this actually these days, but in public speaking. So I make trainings for everyone, but it's not really just normal public speaking training. It involves expressing intense emotions, doing animation. So there's a little bit of my own craziness, like
Sure.
like I love to say. But that's the beauty when you explore and you become someone different, someone unique. Because if you follow the same path as everyone else, if you read the same books, if you read the same news, you just think in the same way that as everyone else. But the more you explore your own path, the more you develop this very uniqueness. And the beautiful thing is that you can never know in advance how it will be used, because then you find and the second beautiful thing is that it's a process that happens in the entirety of human life.
Totally.
So imagine that how many things you can combine and new things you can do right now is a lot less than what you will be able to do in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years. And that's where it becomes mind-blowing, because we have this tendency of only seeing the right now, the very short term. But if you spread it onto an entire lifetime, and you realize that those things are getting better and better year after year. And I wonder what will come next.
Me too.
But it's amazing. It's really amazing. You said before, Lindsey, you connect the dots backwards. That's the famous saying from Steve Jobs, when he said that I think he had a calligraphy course when he was in university.
Exactly.
It didn't make any sense. And then when he launched the Mac, that they used those different typos, and then it became a big success. And you can never know. The more skills you get, you never know how you will combine them and where they will make sense. But this is a belief that you can only have after. So what would you say to all those people who feel they're acting random? They feel they're acting random. They don't really know how it will turn. They're a bit unsure.
Right. I think, and we mentioned specialists at the beginning of our conversation. And I think a lot of folks really love to pit specialists against generalists. And I think that's ridiculous, because all that being a generalist is stacking your specialties. So if you have multiple different skills and you combine them, or you braid them together, or you intersect them, however you want to think about it, like that is then the work that you're doing. So I like to think of it even as almost like Lego blocks. If I have a bunch of different types of Lego blocks, I can build a bunch of different structures rather than just building a single tower or just having a block. Like, we're not going to get very far with that. And so that was something I worked on a project for the last 2 years called Generalist World, which is an online community for folks with nonlinear careers, mostly leaders with nonlinear careers. And that to me was such an interesting experience, because we had almost 700 people in the community who identified as generalists, who were like, I don't know how to move through the world. I'm this square peg, round hole. Like, what do I do? And then you have conversations with these people, and they're like me, like both of you, who are incredible, who have accomplished so many things. And yet, to Charlie's point about ATS systems and resumes, their skills didn't fit neatly in a cute little box to then pass through some bullshit ATS system. So they were constantly getting rejected and told no and overlooked. And that to me was just absolutely atrocious, because so much talent gets looked over because it didn't check a certain box. And so all of that to say, follow your curiosities. And I think a lot of people follow your passion, follow your curiosity, follow your gut, whatever. Like, it's less about that. It's more, it doesn't have to be a blanket statement applied to your entire life. Like, just if I'm curious right now, for example, I was looking in some old ancestry documentation, and a bunch of it was in Yiddish, because that's what my great-great-grandparents spoke, and so on and so forth. And because I'm an overly curious person, I am now in a Yiddish class on Tuesdays. What the hell am I going to do with that, Jeff? Probably nothing. Probably nothing. But it is interesting enough, and I'm curious enough that for, it was like $120 every Tuesday for like a couple of weeks to meet with other people who are part of the Workers Circle, which is like a very progressive Jewish organization here in New York City. I'm like, hey, I learned some new things. Maybe I can communicate with my grandmother better, and maybe I'll meet a new friend or two here in New York City. Like, what's the worst case scenario? And that's really how I think about things. That is probably the most tactical piece of advice, would be thinking about things through the lens of what is the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is I spent $120 and I'm spending, let's call it 7 hours from my entire summer on a Zoom call confused. That's the worst, the worst case scenario. And the best case is what I said earlier. I get to meet new people, I learn some new things, and who knows what that'll inform.
Oy vey. Okay, we gotta. No, and that's such a cool kind of way of thinking about this like risk analysis trade-off of investing time and resources into stuff that is not the traditional route. But I kind of want to go a step further because there's one topic that I love talking about, but that's super important for people like us that have non-traditional backgrounds, and that's networking. One more for the networking counter. It's a running joke on this podcast that we're either talking about networking or Toastmasters. So one more point for me. But the idea is this, right? I think there are a lot of people who kind of, whether it's by choice or kind of by force, if you get laid off, for example, and it's tough finding a job, you can't just like sit around doing nothing. I mean, I guess you can, but like I don't advise it. But in doing that, you're kind of exploring your, different facets of your life, the ones that are interesting, the ones that are maybe worthwhile to you while you try and find a job. But even then, I think the people that get the most out of a non-traditional background are the ones who are really good at working with people, right? And whether or not it's in a more traditional sense, such as going out and meeting people from different firms or different like professions and talking to them about your skills and how good you are at XYZ thing, or non-traditional, right? Going to a jam band and like saying like, hey, listen, I can play guitar or I can play bass, like put me in, coach, kind of a deal. And then you just figure out like, okay, maybe that the guitarist brother is a big shot at a firm that I applied to. Maybe I can sit down and have coffee with them. But I guess, since you kind of had to do this through the length of your career, what are the ways that like traditional versus non-traditional networking have helped you in your career? And I mean, I guess ultimately, what is the value that you can get out of it as a person with a non-traditional background?
Sure. I think when it comes to networking, I think about it in terms of increasing my serendipity surface area. That's like, how many people can I meet that are going to potentially be interested in me, or I will be interested in them and their work. And I'm just always looking for the patterns and or the dots to connect. And so I think, again, this comes from a very genuine place of curiosity. I think when people network from a place of desperation, in a lot of ways, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go to this conference, and by the time I end this get out of this conference, I'm going to have a great job offer or a new client or like some sort of defined outcome. And that, at least in my experience, always ends up being the absolute worst, because we're talking about people. These are human beings that you are building a relationship with. It is much more like gardening than anything. You are starting with an initial conversation, you are starting to plant seeds, and maybe they'll grow something very instantaneously. Right. And maybe they won't. Or maybe in 5 years from now, all of a sudden you'll have a tree to be under. Like, I don't know. But thinking about it more through that lens has definitely taken the pressure off of situations. And it's also one of the workshops that I've run a bunch is about helping people develop their one-liners. And so for someone who has a more traditional job, maybe they are an accountant or an attorney, a doctor, whatever, you don't even need a sentence for that. You just say, I'm a doctor. And that's it. And everyone is thrilled and they pat you on the back and you call it a day. Whereas for folks who have had non-traditional careers like us, you may have a one-liner for maybe the work that you've done, Charlie, as an accountant, or maybe you'll have a one-liner for all of the coaching work that you're doing. And maybe you'll have another one-liner for something else. And so it does put a little bit more work onto the person who does have that more non-traditional path. But I'm willing to put in that effort because I can go to your point of put me in, coach. I'm like, put me in, coach. I could talk to you about anything at almost any time. And I know enough about a lot of different things to be dangerous, more or less. And if I don't know, I'm humble enough to admit that I don't know, and I'm curious enough to ask. And at the end of the day, in terms of, it all comes back to that mission statement for me of having folks feel seen, heard, understood. And curiosity is, to me, the main way to do that.
Completely agree. Yeah. I mean, with almost everything that we said, that you said this episode, the only thing I can do is I agree. Which put me in the weird position also because okay, so okay, I agree, and then
love it.
But so there is something else onto which I agree. I'm still gonna ask the question because I also have those this curiosity driven and the asking question and trying to discover everything, and I realized that it makes me very good at connecting with almost everyone. Sure. It's always find a common point, always find something. It makes it very easy, and I think this is one of the reasons that I enjoy networking so much, because I know that whatever you're doing, there's probably there's I mean not even probably but almost certainly gonna be something that we share.
Exactly.
Do you yeah, so you also you agree with this notion that having many interests and exploring many areas and being very curiosity driven gives you this superpower of?
I think so. That's how it's manifested in my life, and I don't have any intention of changing it anytime soon.
And could you give us a bit more details on this one-liner thing that you said for people who have many interests? Do you have any tips for them so that they can present themselves in a concise way?
Let's see. Let's see. We got thoughts. We got thoughts on this. I was gonna see. I don't think I can bring it up in time, but that's okay. And the whole thing here, from a one-liner perspective, the structure, and again, this is a loose structure. Some people get very caught up in the rigidity of it, but this is a starting point. And the formula, if you will, that I use is I help insert target audience achieve a specific outcome by insert your unique approach. And then the thing here at the end of that is that you need to end it with, let me tell you about the time I insert thing here. And so that, I think, is the part that a lot of people struggle with, is that they haven't taken the time to sit and reflect on all that they've accomplished, especially if they've had a nonlinear path, a squiggly path, however you want to call it. Taking the time to sit down and actually quantify and measure and get really specific about what it is that you actually did. I like to joke when people ask me, oh, what do you do? Like, whatever needs to get done. That is cheeky. It's a little bit aggressive. Depending on the person, depends on how that goes over. But for folks in general, like, if you have a simple response to what do you do, and then you can actually show, not tell, with an example, that is what has opened tons and tons and tons of doors. So for me, rather than saying, well, I'm really good at logistics and I can help people travel and I, am good at herding cats, like that's not interesting. But if I can say, oh, well, I tour managed for Warped Tour many times and I got 30 plus people around the world and back, nobody got arrested, we all made it back. Like, what's more interesting? That's going to open a door and someone's going to remember me. But I think the nuance, again, is it's all contextual. So you need to be able to read the room depending on who you're talking to, depending on what the end goal is. I'm not going to start talking about my music industry and touring days more often than not when I'm trying to pitch myself as a creative director. Those don't necessarily go hand in hand. People don't connect those dots. If I've learned anything, it's that other people do not connect the dots. You have to connect the dots for them. That is true. And so I need to be able to have my own examples and say, oh, actually, this is what I'm doing.
First of all, what a millennial flex talking about having worked on Warped Tour. I love it. Very jealous. But on top of that, I think it's such an interesting methodology behind how we present ourselves. Because I think you're right. Nobody connects the dots right away.
For
and
sure.
I think the rigidity of how we try to put ourselves out there is so
Totally.
detrimental for one reason and one reason only, in my opinion, because it's
Sure.
so incredibly boring, right?
Yeah.
The idea that, like, if I
Without a
have to
doubt.
sit there and hear a pre-rehearsed elevator pitch about, how you've converted ROIs in a marketing, and I'm like, I'm already half asleep just trying to give the example. I couldn't
Right.
imagine actually sitting there and listening. Well, no, I could, because a lot of people do that.
We've done it.
But,
We've all done
but
it.
yeah. But the thing is, and when I examine how I do my own one-liners and in my own like introduction myself, is I think one of the cool things that non-traditional background people do is we not only like lead them into like direct examples of, oh, well, this is how this worked out here, but it's like we kind of engage people in almost like a Socratic method of like, what do I actually do, right? Because it's like, okay, like if I have to explain what is a networking coach, it's like,
Right.
okay, do you know what networking is? Yes. Do you really? Explain to me networking. And then it all falls apart for them right there. They're like, oh, well,
Sure.
it's getting to know people and adding them on LinkedIn. And I'm like, no, wrong. And then we get into a conversation over like effective versus ineffective networking. And at the end of this like really cool conversation, of which we're both almost like pitted against each other, trying to kind of work one ideal against the other, they leave knowing one of two things. It's either that I'm incredibly good at what I do and I know what I'm talking about, or holy crap, he talks so much. But like usually it's the first one. But
there you go.
Yeah, but I think it's really important for people to kind of hear a perspective that isn't like a traditional hyper curated kind of methodology.
Definitely. Also,
Because
just stop asking, what do you do? Just stop.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to answer that question. Nobody likes that question. Instead, like the most simplest tweak that you can do, instead of asking someone, what do you do? Just say, what are you excited about? That's it. Just what are you excited about? They could be excited about their kid's baseball game, their new dog, their rescue cat. I don't care, but I want to hear, like, genuinely, what are you pants on fire stoked about? Not, I'm an accountant, I do B2B sales. Like, you don't give a shit about that, and neither do I. So don't tell me.
Well, you know what? Speaking of like what we are excited about, Jeff and I started this podcast because we are enamored with cool people. And selfishly, we kind of just wanted to talk to a bunch of cool people and get to know their story and their background. But you know, doing things for selfish reasons sometimes isn't always the best. You have to be a little bit generous. And how we do that is we figure that people who have gone through really tough things or really tough
Mm,
backgrounds or again, non-traditional backgrounds,
sure.
develop some really interesting and really useful skills.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
true.
what we like to ask from everyone that comes on our show is, you know, the people who are listening are probably, uh, anyone from like students, people in
Sure.
transition,
Hmm.
people trying to figure out what they want to do when they grow up, or just people who are genuinely interested in how you got from, you know,
Yeah.
high school wedding photographer to creative director, and
Right.
then everything in between. So, but what's one skill that has
Mm,
served you through the entirety of your career that you can say, yeah, if you start doing this today, you're going to have a really, really awesome life ahead of you?
mm,
What's one
totally.
skill you can give the people?
Handwritten thank you notes.
Okay. Oh, elaborate, please. I need to know.
That has been the biggest game changer because it, one, to your point about like selfish and generous reasons, for selfish reasons, it is a time to pause, to reflect, and to have a ritual around whatever exchange you just had with a person, being able to like actually sit down, physically write something out, and in that note including the why of why it was so important to you. Like that is great in solidifying that from some memory perspective and really stamping that interaction. And then on the other side of it, it's like, especially in this AI driven, move fast, break things realm that we are in at the moment, it's the antithesis of that. And I've been doing this since 2007. And that's one habit that has been consistent for throughout like my entire working everything.
Interesting. Whoa. So yeah, at some point you need some time to integrate everything and
Yeah.
to spend time to reflect.
Mm-hmm.
Lindsay, thank
Exactly.
you so much. Thank you so much for this
Exactly.
interview, full of energy, full of passion, full of enthusiasm.
Always.
But before we leave, I would like to ask you a question that we ask all of our guests.
Okay.
I'm sure you're gonna love it. You have 2 minutes where I will give you the magic microphone. And
Okay.
the magic microphone is magic because it allows you to leave a message to everyone on the planet.
Mm,
Everyone who's living today, but also everyone on the next generations.
sure.
It's your moment to leave a universal message.
Mm,
And you can
mm.
take as long as you want to think. What would be your message?
That is a great question. That is a great question. I think it would be very simple. It's like take a breath, go slower, be kinder. Like that is what we need more of, especially like now more than ever before. It's like take a breath, probably go get a snack. Like, you, you need to be able to like come from a different place. I read a stat earlier that was said something to the effect of we are now able, because of technology, to put, I think it was like 31.2 hours into a day because of how much faster everything is going. And when you think about that, it's like we as just human beings, I would argue, are not meant to be doing that. We do not need to hold that much. We do not need that much capacity. And so that would be my message would be take a deep breath or three or four or five and pass that on to as many people as possible because you never know what other people are going through.
Hear that, everyone? Chill out, relax.
Yes.
You're good.
Touch some grass, you know?
uh, incredible. Lindsey, thank you so much for joining us. This has been
Yeah, thanks for having
such a
me.
cool deep dive into like a unique and weird and squiggly past, but uh certainly an incredibly bright future for anyone who says, yeah, maybe I'm not just going to follow one path. That's fine.
Love it. Love it.
Awesome. So, listeners, if you're still listening, thank you so much for joining us. Please make sure to like, subscribe, send this to a friend who needs a little pick-me-up, a little positivity over, maybe quitting that technical degree and becoming a drummer in a band. And make sure to catch Casually Pro every Wednesday, where we talk to incredible people over their incredible lives and eke out some of that great wisdom. Thank you so much. Take care, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.